Okay, it looks like everyone can hear me. That's wonderful. Welcome to the latest webinar in our alumni webinar series. My name is Casey Neely, and I am the program coordinator of US Jet AA. I will be moderating the webinar today. First, I'd like to welcome today's speaker, Kamara Toffolo. Thank you for joining us. Today's webinar will provide information on how to put together a resume as you prepare for future opportunities. But before we begin, I'd like to introduce US Jet AA, the United States-Japan Exchange and Teaching Program Alumni Association. US Jet AA is a nonprofit organization that furthers the US-Japan relationship by supporting alumni of the JET program. We provide resources for individual JET alumni, JET AA chapters nationwide, and potential JET participants. We provide the leadership of the 19 US Jet AA chapters with programming, membership recruitment, chapter management, professional development, and fundraising. If you're a JET program alumni and you're not already a member, please join for free today at usjetaa.org. We currently run 5 annual programs. The first is a partnership with Sasakawa USA to provide grant funding to JET AA chapters and sub-chapters to hold events in their local communities on US-Japan relations. We also facilitate a leadership program funded by the Japan Foundation, CGP, and CLARE, where representatives from US Jet AA visit Jet AA chapters and sub-chapters to hold tailored workshops focused on leadership and growth. Our second program is the webinar series, which you're attending today. We hold 2 different series, one for Jet AA chapter leaders and the other for individual JET alumni. Our third program is the Microgrant Initiative with the U.S. Embassy Tokyo, which funds current American JETs for projects in their schools and local communities. One of our newest programs is a partnership between US Jet AA and the East-West Center in Washington, D.C., where we call on JET alumni to be authors and write articles for the East-West Center website, Asia Matters for America. These programs are not currently accepting applications, but we encourage you to check back on our website to find out more information and to get updates as we get closer to the fall. If you like this type of content and want to see it continue, we encourage you to consider donating to US Jet AA or becoming a sustaining member on our website. Before I turn it over to Kamara, I'd like to let listeners know that we are recording the webinar and we'll post it on our website for those who couldn't attend. So if you know anyone who wanted to attend but couldn't attend in person, just let them know that we will be posting it soon. As the webinar is going on, please type any questions that you have into the chat or Q&A feature. During the Q&A at the end, you can also use the raise hand function if you would like to ask a question using your microphone. I'll also be posting links in the Q&A box to some of the things that are referenced as the webinar goes along. So be sure to check there if you would like more information. Now I'm going to pass it over to Kamara. I'm going to go ahead and give her those privileges so that she can share her PowerPoint.
Great, thank you, Casey. All right, let's see here. Can you see my screen, Casey?
Yes, we can see your PowerPoint.
Okay, fantastic. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. So this webinar will be focused purely on resumes. USJA approached me about doing resumes and LinkedIn, but resumes are such a meaty subject in and of themselves. We're devoting this entire evening just to resumes. So I hope that you find this particularly valuable and a good use of your evening tonight. So first, let's get into the agenda, what we're going to cover. Quite a few things. First, I want to cover the time period before you write your resume. There's some things that you need to cover off before you launch into writing your resume. Then I'm going to talk about this thing that I call the Kickass Kudos file. It's really, really important. Then we're going to talk about your many transferable skills. It may not seem like you have a ton from being a JET, but believe me, there are many. Then we'll get into the modern resume writing strategies, resume structure and formatting, how you can amplify your value with accomplishments, and then we'll bring it all together and I'll show you actually a snippet from my own resume. So who am I? My name is Kamara Toffolo, and I am a certified coach 2 times over, resume writer, and LinkedIn expert. I was actually named this year's #1 job search strategist to follow on LinkedIn by JobScan. I was recently published in a best-selling book, and I've been featured on various media as well. I'm a Goomba Jet, and I have clients all over the world, including Jets and former Jets. And yeah, that's a bit about me. So the whole job searching adventure is very daunting, isn't it? Really standing out from the crowd and showing the value that you can offer to a target employer is quite challenging. And you want to make sure that you're not sounding like everybody else. So this is what we're here to discuss tonight. So let's talk about a bit about the jet dilemma. So we do have a bit of a specific dilemma as jobs seeking jets. When we went on jet, we had many life-changing experiences. Nobody can really relate to what we experienced in Japan. Our family, friends, colleagues, if they didn't do jet or something similar, it's really hard for them to grasp the impact that it had on our lives. And we could find ourselves in a bit of a career conundrum now that we've returned from jet or we're planning our return from jet. We may have left a career behind to go on jet and now we're ready to get back into it. That was the scenario that I was in. You may have been early in your career, recently out of university, and now you're trying to launch your career. Or maybe jet really changed your perspective on things and now you find yourself ready for a career transformation. So today, the advice I'll provide you with regard to resumes would be applicable to any of these scenarios. So before you write your resume, it's really important to tackle a few big things. First, what I really urge you to do is figure out where you're headed in your career. This is particularly important because if you don't figure out where you're headed first, when you create a resume, you're always going to be creating a resume to apply to a bit of a moving target. So you're going to be reinventing the wheel every single time something seems interesting that you want to apply to. So really taking the time to figure out what's next for yourself in your career. I do recommend working with a career coach if you find you need some support in that respect. They can help you explore and discover where your strengths would be best utilized and where you would feel most fulfilled in work. They can also help you identify target jobs. Target jobs are going to be key to equip you with the right information to build your resume. Another thing that's important to figure out is, or reflect on, is what have you accomplished? It's important to take stock of this, and we're going to get into what's important to recall, reflect upon, and take note of shortly. And third, we want to figure out how jet will support you in getting to the next step in your career. So tonight we're really going to focus on 2 and 3. So let's get into it. So I mentioned the Kickass Kudos file. This is one of my favorite things in career development. It's basically a running document that you keep. Could be a Word file, could be in your notes app, in your phone, could be truly anywhere. It's just a running document where you take stock and keep track of all of your work wins. It's basically a brain dump of awesomeness. Some examples of what you would want to make sure you're tracking and accounting for in your document. Sorry, I just saw something in the chat, sorry. That I want you to make sure you're accounting for in your document are positive outcomes and results that you've achieved, money that you've made or saved for your company, let's say, where you've saved time or created efficiency, how you may have changed things for the better in your workplace, and any times that you've mentored someone. So these work wins are something you want to track on an ongoing basis, basically until you retire. These are going to make up the meat of your resume. And I created a video in my Tuesday video series called Work Wins to Always Track. And I believe that Casey has put that link in the chat for you to take a look at when it's convenient. Okay, so let's talk a bit about your many transferable skills. So after you finish JET, or as you are finishing JET, you may think, I don't really have a lot to offer from my time with JET, but that actually couldn't be further from the truth. There's a lot that's transferable. In fact, I believe that almost every single skill that you acquire is transferable to something else. So many of us did classroom teaching. Now, maybe where we're headed next in our career, classroom teaching isn't really that applicable, but that's okay. Because when we translate it into our new direction, this could look something like facilitation, training, public speaking, presentations, and leadership. Maybe you're engaged in internationalization. This could be perceived as cross-cultural engagement, communication and sensitivity. Or if you were engaged in activities outside of the school, your life in school, that could also include community outreach. And of course, most of us did team teaching. So that's an example of collaboration and cross-functional engagement. Many of us may have done lesson planning as well. And that, of course, translates into planning, presentations, and coordination. And finally, maybe you helped one of your students or many of your students prepare for speech contests. This might translate into coaching or mentoring. So as you can see, a lot of skills that we acquired from JET can be translated into skills that are applicable to many other types of roles. So let's talk a little bit about the modern resume. The modern resume is not your parents' resume. It's totally different, and the expectations of hiring managers and recruiters are totally different than they were, say, even 5 or 10 years ago. So the modern resume has a fresh and modern look, and this is typically achieved through the aesthetic of a resume. We want to go for a sans serif font, so nothing like Times New Roman, but something like Arial or Verdana or Calibri. Those would all fall into the sans serif font family. And we want to avoid what I call bullet barf. So many of us are trained to use almost exclusively bullets on our resume. But we don't want to do that because bullets are supposed to be used to highlight important information strategically. Using all bullets is like highlighting an entire page in a textbook. You're effectively highlighting nothing. So we want to use bullets strategically, and I'll show you later on how we do that. We want to use a full 1 or 2 pages for a resume. My general rule of thumb is 1 page for someone with 5 years or fewer of work experience, and then 2 pages for someone with more than 5 years of work experience. We also want to allow for ample white space. So 1.5 centimeters or 0.6 margins all the way around at a minimum. We want to make sure that the reader can get the important information fast. So all of the information that I'm providing to you today will help make that a possibility. We also want to make sure that it's what we call keyword rich. So the language used in your resume stresses keywords that are associated with your target job. And we'll get more into those shortly. And again, we want ample accomplishments and results. So let's get a bit into resume writing strategy. When I'm building resumes, I like to use what I call a AAA approach. This is where we stress your abilities, which are, of course, your skills, adjectives, words to describe you, and accomplishments. This is the absolute meat of your resume and where we're going to be digging in even further. We want to focus on keywords. So keyword rich that I mentioned in the last slide. You want to study target job postings. And what you're looking for are the words that come up frequently. The words that you see frequently are generally the most important to the employer. And which words match up with your transferable skills. So when you find those words matching up, those are keywords that you can include in your resume by way of, say, your skills section, or where you're describing your duties or responsibilities, or where you're also including some accomplishments. And we'll take another look at this even further. So let's talk about structure and formatting. Now, this may seem intimidating, but I really urge you to start with a blank Word document when you are building your resume. I don't want you to go and buy a template that you find on Pinterest, let's say, or that you find on Etsy. The reason for this is, as beautiful as those templates are, they're designed by talented designers who often don't know what it takes to have a resume that functions very well in the real world. So they're beautiful, but they're not functional. So I really recommend starting with a blank Word document. And I'm going to show you what the structure of a resume will look like so you're not going in totally blind. At the top of your page, we want to start with your name. Make it bold, make the font large, and center it or right justify it. You also want to include your contact information. And when you include your contact information, you want to hyperlink your email and your LinkedIn profile URL. The reason for this is you want to make it super easy for someone to either A, send you an email, or B, go take a look at your LinkedIn profile. And you also want to include a title underneath this. The title will be the role or the position that you are actually applying to with that resume. And the title is something that you will be updating with every single application. The reason for this is it simply identifies the job that you're actually applying to, of course, but it also kind of plants the seed at the very top of your resume that you are the person for that job. Then we're going to follow this up with a professional summary, a small paragraph that describes how you show up as a professional. We're not using objective statements. Objective statements are considered self-serving. When we are creating our resume or cover letter or LinkedIn, we want to write it from the point of view of the employer in terms of hey employer, this is the value that I can bring to the table. Then you would follow up your professional summary with a skills section. Now, you may be listing several skills, maybe 10 or more. I generally limit them to no more than 16. And when you're listing them, to make it easier on the reader's eyes, you can use columns, but do not use text boxes, as these can be poorly digested by any online job searching software that is used by a hiring manager or recruiter. And then after your skills section, you'll include your professional experience. And we want to always make sure that when we're listing our professional experience, that we're listing each role chronologically. The reason for this is the preferred way that hiring managers and recruiters like to see your work experience. It's easy for them to get the important information fast, going back to one of those earlier points. We also want to make sure that any dates for duration of time we were in jobs is located on the right margin. The reason for this is it's aligning with how readers scan a resume with their eyes. So when a hiring manager or recruiter gets a resume, their eyes follow a very typical pattern, and they scan from the top left corner all the way to the right corner and then down the right-hand margin. What they're looking for there is chronology and minimal employment gaps. So it sounds like such a simple thing, but it's so important to always have your dates on the right-hand margin. Nearing the bottom of your resume, you'll include any community involvement or volunteering. Now, don't worry, if you don't have any community involvement or volunteering, it's okay that you don't. This is really a nice to have. It's not going to make or break your resume. And finally, you'll also include your education, and that should be at the very bottom of your resume. And Casey will put a link in the chat shortly for a video that I made on common formatting mistakes on resumes. So you might find that helpful as well. So let's take a look at my actual resume. So I removed some of the information, but this is the general look that goes with the instructions that I provided in the earlier slide. So as you can see, my name is at the top, big and bold, and I followed that up with my city and province, or for you, city and state, phone number, email, which is hyperlinked, and my LinkedIn profile, which is hyperlinked. Here's my title, client management professional. I could have done a better job and been even more specific here. Perhaps if I was applying to an account manager role, I would have been very specific and said account manager. And here is my short little blurb on me and how I show up as a professional. Following that up with my skills section, and then my professional experience section, where my dates are all the way on the right-hand side. Now, when we're describing each role, we want to give a little bit of variety to how we display the text. Before I said that we want to use bullets strategically, and we certainly do. We want to use them to highlight really important accomplishments, and we're going to dig into accomplishments even further shortly. But before that, we want to take a moment to write a small paragraph about the actual role itself. This is where we can describe duties, responsibilities, things we're accountable for, anything that was part of the role. Okay, so let's move on to looking at accomplishments in greater detail. So accomplishments are the things that you get and gathered and wrote and continue to write in your Kickass Kudos file. The reason I love the Kickass Kudos file is because it makes your resume writing experience much faster, much more efficient, and a lot less painless than it may have been before. So your Kickass Kudos file has the meat of your resume, your accomplishments. Your accomplishments, again, are work wins, the outstanding things that you've done. When we're writing our accomplishments and when we're writing our entire resume, we need to make sure it makes sense for our target direction. That's why it's so important to identify where you're headed first before you write your resume. And when we're writing accomplishments, we want to focus on what's called quantifiable accomplishments. That's where we bring in numbers. The reason we want to focus on quantifiable accomplishments is because numbers can convey impact much more quickly than words and can even transcend language. So numbers are very powerful. And to tap into numbers that may be associated with your accomplishments, you can ask yourself some questions. You can ask yourself how much, how many, or how often, for example. And when you ask yourself that, you may come up with an accomplishment like taught 25 classes per week to classes of 40 students each, let's say. Or created and delivered 15 unique lesson plans each week. And for our CIRs, advise 120 JET participants from around the world. Now, not everything needs to be quantified. In fact, sometimes it doesn't actually make sense to quantify an accomplishment based on its nature. And when it doesn't make sense, or if the number actually diminishes or detracts from the work that you did, that's when we want to avoid using a number. And I've actually written a job scan article on non-quantifiable accomplishments, and Casey will put a link to that article in the chat. So let's bring it all together here. So we've talked about accomplishments, we've talked about the structure of the resume, we've talked about transferable skills. So let's bring it all together, and this is from my resume, this is how I described my time as an ALT. So as you can see, I've really tried to stress the transferable skills particularly here, and I'll show you where. So instead of saying I just taught classes, I facilitated the classes. Of course, I said I planned the lessons. I collaborated with my team teacher. And I coached my students. So this language really translates well to many different types of roles. And as you can see, I also included my quantifiable accomplishments that we identified in the earlier slide. So in summary, there's a few key things that I want to make sure that you take away from tonight. Number one, get really clear on where you're headed, and get so clear that you've identified target jobs that you'd like to apply to. I want you to take stock of where you've been and track your work wins basically until you retire. This is the running document of your Kickass Kudos file will serve you well, whether you're writing a resume, whether you're writing a LinkedIn profile, or whether you're asking for a promotion or a raise at work. This is where you can really access the great, outstanding things that you've done at work and on the job. And I want you to translate your skills and stories to make them make sense for your next career move. That's super key. So beware of JET jargon. ALT, CIR, people don't know what that means outside of our world. So make it make sense. And if you're looking for more support or more advice, please engage with me on social media. I'm Kamara Toffolo everywhere. And I post new videos on job searching, resumes, LinkedIn, cover letters, and all related advice on Tuesdays, every single Tuesday. And you can find those on YouTube and LinkedIn. And the hashtag is Tuesday10. So you can subscribe to my YouTube channel and turn on the bell for notifications, or meet me over on LinkedIn. And the links are in the chat for my social. And I think I just saw someone's hand go up. So what questions do you guys have?
Thank you, Kamara. That was really informative. I definitely learned quite a few new things.
Thank you.
Now we will take questions. It looks like someone already has a question, so we'll let them go ahead and ask that question. You can also ask questions in the chat box or the Q&A function. So if you want to type in your questions on either of those, we'll go ahead and answer those as well. So it looks like Colton Osborne has a question, so we'll go ahead and unmute him and let him ask his question.
I think he also typed it here.
Ah, okay.
Okay.
We can just go ahead and do that.
Can we get the resume template shown again? Yes. Let me back up to that. Oh, there we go. I'll leave it there for a little bit.
We also had the question, many people go to grad school right after JET. Do you have any advice about crafting a CV or resume for grad school?
Yes, okay, so for grad school and for higher academic work, you need to make sure you're really clear with the application or admission requirements. So there's a difference between a resume and an academic CV. Particularly in the US, if you see CV, it would lead me to believe that more likely than not, they're talking about an academic CV. CVs are pretty boring. They're just kind of a data dump of everything you've ever done in your entire life. Resumes, on the other hand, are what we went over today. So while I can't advise on good CV strategy, what I can advise on is good resume strategy for a recent grad someone going into grad school. And what I would recommend is making sure that your education is quite clear, and possibly leading with your education. And also letting the reader know what unique perspective or unique value you can bring to your cohort in your new master's program. Master's programs really aim to have diverse thinkers in their groups, and so showing that you have diverse interests, diverse experiences will serve you well. So that's what I would recommend.
Great answer. It looks like we have another question from Akio. How do you handle short-term temporary jobs, particularly if they would clutter a resume, but not including them would create employment gaps?
Really good question. Okay. So what I tend to do is, with many short-term gigs, I tend to consolidate them when I can. So ideally, they might be kind of a similar type of role. If not, it doesn't really matter. But as long as you can find a common thread between the multiple roles, consolidating them together and using a date range for those consolidated roles. So let's say that you were in customer service, and then for a short time, like a contract role, and then an account rep for a short time, and then maybe a project manager for a short time. The project manager might be a bit of an outlier and would probably stand on its own, but for the customer service and account rep roles, you can consolidate those, name the two companies that those are with, and then use a total date range rather than splitting them up into two. And then when you're talking about the roles, talking about them kind of together as though they were one type of thing, and then using the best accomplishments across that time period. So consolidating when you can. It's not always possible, but when you can.
That's a really great way to handle that. We also have a question from Nicole. What advice, suggestions do you have for people who have been back from JET a very long time, like me, 29 years, who have changed careers a lot?
Good question. Okay, so if you've changed careers a lot, what's important is not to necessarily draw attention to or worry about drawing attention to the career changes, more so showing progression through your career, and showing evolution of your career. So no doubt that, so you've changed careers a lot, but no doubt you've taken on roles that have more responsibility, and then more responsibility, and then even more. So showing that progression is really important, and making that kind of a foundational story of your resume. And the accomplishments that you highlight can really help you with that. So if you've been back for 29 years, I suspect probably you've been in leadership type roles. And so bringing out some of the leadership work that you've done, the teams that you've led, that would be really important. And also, this goes back to very early in the presentation where we want to determine and get clear on our target direction. That can also help you cherry pick what's most important to display on your resume. So while you don't want to create any career gaps, you don't need to say a ton of stuff about every single role. You can prioritize what you say about the roles that are most applicable to your current direction. So, hope that helps. Kind of a long answer.
Very comprehensive, though. Let's see. So if there's anybody else has questions, please type in your questions. You can also use the raise hand function to ask your questions in person. I also wanted to let everyone know, while everyone's sort of thinking about their questions, that we're going to have another webinar on May 23rd with Kamara that will be on utilizing LinkedIn. So it'll be the second part of the series. This one is on resume, and then the next one will be on LinkedIn specifically. So we don't have it posted yet, but we will have it posted this week. So I would encourage you to check back on our Facebook. But if anyone else has questions, please go ahead and type them into the chat box or the Q&A. Looks like we're not any other questions. So I have a question. If you are on JET and you're thinking about doing something, your next job is going to be completely different, and you don't think any of your skills that you've had in the past sort of blend into your next job, what is a good way to talk about your skills or talk about your experiences that could sort of help you to make a career transition?
So it's difficult to see that there are transferable skills, and I would pretty much bet that in every scenario, something that you learned or did on JET developed a skill that you can take anywhere else. And so it's just a matter of really thinking long and hard about it. So once you've got that, what is important is kind of telling the story about where you were and where you want to be next. And also thinking of ways that you can almost spin, like a politician, spin your work on JET to make it sound attractive to an employer. So the way to figure that out is to study the employer, your target employer, and get to know what's called, get to know what their pain points are, what they struggle with in business or in operations, let's say, where they particularly need help. And then reflecting on your time in JET and considering what skills you built on JET that would meet that need. And then what you really want to do is stress that obviously on your resume, but also stress it on your cover letter. So on your cover letter, you want to call out the fact like, hey, yeah, I'm going to be transitioning into a totally new profession, but I believe that I can make an impact because this, and this. So going back to the pain points of the target company that you're applying to, why you can make a particular impact or add particular unique value to their company. So that's what I would recommend. Telling more of the story so they're aware of it. And also telling more of a story in your cover letter helps the reader connect with you more. So you stand out amongst a sea of very generic cover letters.
And sort of following off of that, what advice would you have for writing cover letters and sort of honing in on those, skills in your resume and not just, making a repeat of your resume, but sort of telling a story throughout your cover letter?
Yeah, so that you really hit it on the nail on the head. You don't want your cover letter to be a regurgitation of your resume. It's where you tell the parts of your story that your resume couldn't. I mean, with resumes, we're kind of restricted to a certain extent because we do need to follow a resume convention, really. But you have much more creative license on your cover letter to be more personal and engaging and warm with your language. With cover letters, I would really recommend being brief, trying to keep it as concise as possible. I would recommend opening with a really bold opener. So nothing like, I'm really excited to apply to blah role, or I saw blah role in the, on Indeed, and it was really interesting, so I'd like to apply to it. We don't want to use that type of language. We want to use language like, Amazon is known for its exceptional customer service, and I'd love to be a part of the Amazon customer team, or that's a value I share and I'd love to be a part of the Amazon customer service team, for example. Really going for that bold, eye-catching opening so that you encourage the reader to read more. Because cover letters often don't get read. That doesn't mean you shouldn't include one, but you really want to go for something catchy and punchy when you can, and then following it up with telling that part of your story like we were referring to before, and then getting into core skills that you can bring to the table and backing them up with examples.
That's a great advice. And I'm definitely going to be shaping up my resume and cover letter. If there are any other questions, any last minute questions that you have for Kamara, go ahead and type them into the chat function or the Q&A, or you can also use the raise hand function. But if there aren't any other questions, then we'll go ahead and wrap for today. I wanted to remind everyone again that we have another webinar on LinkedIn on May 23rd. That will also be with Kamara, that you can check on our Facebook and sign up there. We'll also be having webinars throughout the summer on different career building skills and learning more about careers. So I would definitely sign up to find out more about that. It will also be available on our website and on our Twitter. So if you need that information, you should look there. It doesn't look like we have any other questions.
I'm wondering if Jarrett got his question answered. I noticed he's in the.
Jarrett?
Oh no, sorry, he's a call-in listener. Sorry.
Okay.
I thought I saw his hand up. Okay.
Looks like we have a comment from Nicole in the Q&A.
Right.
I think yeah, do you see that?
Yeah. I think my struggle is dealing with age discrimination. Looking for a new way to refresh my resume. Hasn't been a long time. Okay, yeah, Nicole, I definitely recommend that you check out my Tuesday 10 video series. In fact, I just did a video 2 weeks ago on ageism. So that might be interesting to you. And keeping your age discreet, though I hate that I hate that ageism is something we have to contend with as job seekers. It should not be. It's totally wrong.
Okay, it doesn't look like I see any more questions, so we'll go ahead and wrap for today. Thank you everyone for joining us for the webinar. Really great questions and really great information from Kamara. Thank you for agreeing to do this webinar. Like I said, please stay tuned to our social media for future webinars. And if you have any other questions, you can also email us and we can follow up with that. We'll be posting the webinar in a couple of weeks. So if you know anyone who missed it, you can check back on our website. So thank you everyone for joining. Hope you have a nice night or the rest of your day, wherever you're at. And we'll hopefully see you in the next webinar.